I'm standing at the grocery checkout on a Thursday afternoon when my card declines. It's a regular Thursday. Nothing unusual about it. I have a cart with the usual things: vegetables, pasta, coffee, the specific brand of yogurt my daughter likes. The cashier is a teenager who handles the declined card with the practiced neutrality of someone who deals with this regularly, and I feel the small, specific embarrassment of the person behind me shifting weight. I try the card again. Declined. I open my banking app on my phone. My thumb goes to the savings account, the one we built together over 9 years of marriage. Every bonus I ever received at work. Every tax return. Every month I transferred the extra $40 or $60 or $100 that didn't get spent on anything else because I believed in having a cushion. Because I believed that the emergency fund was the difference between a hard moment and a ruined one. The balance reads $. I stare at it long enough that the teenager says, "Ma'am?" I pay for the groceries with a credit card I barely use and push my cart to the car on autopilot. I'm still looking at my phone. Still looking at the zero. My phone buzzes. A text from Caleb. "Relax, I moved it. Trust me." Relax, as if the problem is my reaction and not the missing money. As if trust is something he can demand after doing something without telling me. I sit in the driver's seat and look at the transfer detail. The amount is everything. Every dollar. The account it went to is listed by a reference number and a recipient name. The name is not mine. It's not Caleb's. It's not any business name I recognize. It's not any name I have ever heard in 9 years of being married to this man. I read it 3 times to make sure I'm reading it correctly. I am. My name is Heidi. I'm 46 years old, and I have been the careful one for as long as I can remember. Not careful in a fearful way. Careful in the way that comes from watching my parents live paycheck to paycheck my entire childhood and deciding very young that I was going to build a different kind of stability for myself. Careful in the way that reads financial statements and tracks every category of spending and knows to the dollar what we have and what we owe. I've worked in healthcare administration for 18 years. I'm good at my job. I earn a reliable salary, and I've directed a meaningful portion of every paycheck into savings since the first month I had a real income. When Caleb and I married 9 years ago, I brought the savings habit with me. It became our emergency fund, our cushion. The thing that let us sleep at night when the car needed repairs or the furnace needed replacing or one of us had a slow month. I protected that account the way some people protect a garden, with attention, with consistency, with the understanding that what you grow over years can be destroyed in a single careless afternoon. Caleb comes home at 6 that evening. He's calm, almost relaxed. The calm of someone who has already processed a decision and is past the part where it felt urgent. He sets his keys on the counter and opens the refrigerator. "Did you see my text?" he says. "I saw your text," I say. "What investment? What recipient? Who is that name?" He closes the refrigerator and turns around with the expression of someone gearing up to be patient with a person who is overreacting. "It's an investment," he says. "A real one. Don't start. Don't start." 9 years of building that account, and when I ask about the zero, I'm told don't start. I pick up my phone and look at the transfer detail again. Then I notice something. The app shows today's date on the transfer, but the reference number has a format I've seen before on older statements. I've been receiving paper statements for years out of habit. The reference number format looks older. Much older than today. Caleb pours himself a glass of water and leans against the counter. He explains the investment the way you explain something to a person you've decided doesn't need full information. General strokes. Promising opportunity. Something Loretta mentioned. Temporary arrangement. "I need to see the paperwork," I say. "There isn't paperwork yet. It's early stage. Caleb, that account had our entire emergency fund." "I know what it had." His voice is still patient, but the patience is thinning at the edges. "It's still ours. The money didn't disappear. It's working." "Working where? For who?" "I don't know that name. It's a contact of Loretta's." He waves a hand. "You'd have to know the context to understand it." And there it is. The phrase that has been used on me in various forms throughout our marriage. The suggestion that I lack the context, the knowledge, the sophistication to understand what he's doing. That my confusion is a competence problem rather than a communication problem. You wouldn't understand money, he says. And then he goes to the living room. I stand at the kitchen counter for a long moment. My hands are on the edge of the sink. The water is running and I turn it off. My phone rings. A name I know immediately. Loretta, Caleb's mother. She calls and her voice is warm and sweet the way it always is when she's about to say something that isn't. Heidi, honey, she says, I heard you're being difficult. Being difficult. I asked my husband where our savings went and I'm being difficult. I just have questions, I say carefully. Of course you do, she says. We'll sort it all out. Don't worry yourself. She hangs up. I stand in my kitchen and I start to understand that this conversation happened before I called her. Loretta arrives the next morning with a casserole. She has always arrived with casseroles. At funerals, at illness, at tension. Warm food as a social currency, as a way of positioning herself as the nurturer whose presence is generosity rather than intrusion. She sets it on my kitchen counter and then sits at my kitchen table in the chair that faces the room, which is the chair that belongs to whoever is running the meeting. Heidi, she says, patting the table beside her. Sit down. I sit across from her. Caleb stands in the doorway. He has the posture of a child who has gone to his mother for backup and is now hoping the backup is sufficient. Loretta pats my hand the way she always does. Firm enough to be a statement, gentle enough to look like comfort. A good wife doesn't question her husband's decisions. She says, Caleb is smart. He's providing. Let him provide. He moved our emergency fund without telling me, I say. All of it, and he had his reasons. She tilts her head. Heidi, you've always been a little anxious about money. That's understandable. But sometimes anxiety looks like distrust, and distrust damages marriages. My anxiety. The careful saving habits I've maintained since I was 20 years old, reframed as a psychological problem that damages marriages. I look at Caleb. He's nodding. Slowly, like someone who has been told this version of events enough times that he's begun to believe it. I ask for more water. I go to the kitchen, and I stand at the sink. Through the window I can see the backyard, the garden I've tended for 6 years, the small ordinary landscape of my daily life. I hear Loretta's voice drop. She thinks I've moved far enough away. If she panics, she says to Caleb quietly, we'll say it's for her own good. I refill my glass. I walk back to the table. I write it down in the small notebook I've started keeping in my cardigan pocket. That night, when Caleb is in the shower, I go to the filing cabinet. I have kept paper bank statements for 11 years. Every month, filed by year. It's old-fashioned, and Caleb has laughed about it before. Nobody does paper statements anymore, Heidi. But I have kept doing it because I grew up watching my mother look for records that didn't exist, and I decided young that I would always have the paper. I pull the most recent statement. The app showed the transfer as occurring today, Thursday. The paper statement shows something different. The withdrawal was initiated 2 weeks ago, 14 days before the app showed it as completing. The initiation date is there in the transaction history, small and unambiguous. I sit at the filing cabinet and I think about 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago was a Wednesday. 2 weeks ago Wednesday was the day of my Aunt Patricia's funeral. She died after a long illness, and I drove 4 hours to attend, stayed one night at a hotel, and drove back the next morning. I was gone from Tuesday afternoon through Wednesday evening. I was not home, I was not near my phone or my laptop in any meaningful way. I was at a funeral home, and then a reception, and then a hotel room, where I cried for an hour and then slept. I was not home when this transfer was initiated. I go to my phone and I pull up the calendar. I look at the date. There's a calendar entry I didn't create. Caleb. Appointment 3 p.m. On the same day, I was 4 hours away at my aunt's funeral. I don't ask him about the calendar entry right away. I wait until morning. I wait until Loretta has gone home and it's just the two of us at the breakfast table and the house is quiet and there's nowhere for the conversation to deflect. The transfer was initiated 2 weeks ago, I say. Not yesterday. He looks up from his coffee. The app shows when it cleared. The paper statement shows when it started. 2 weeks ago Wednesday. I keep my voice even. I was at Aunt Patricia's funeral on Wednesday. He doesn't miss a beat. You must have approved something before you left, he says. Clicked something on the app. You know how those things work. You authorize something and it processes later. I didn't click anything. Or you forgot. He shrugs slightly. Heidi, we've both been busy. Memory isn't perfect. Loretta appears in the doorway. She must have come back while I was gathering my thoughts, or she never left. Women get emotional about money, she says, pleasantly from the doorway. It clouds the memory. I look at my hands on the table. I open my phone. I open the calendar app. I turn it toward Caleb. Go put this entry on your calendar, I say. The 3 p.m. appointment on the same day I was away. He looks at it. A work thing. I don't remember every... Whose appointment? I ask. He picks up his coffee. He doesn't answer. I go to the bank that morning, not the drive-thru, not the app. In person, which is how I do things when I need to see someone's face and have someone see mine. I ask for the branch manager and wait 15 minutes in a chair near the window watching traffic go by and trying to feel more certain than I do. The manager's name is Marin. She's in her 40s, efficient, with the specific manner of someone who has learned to keep her expression neutral while delivering complicated information. She pulls up the account history on her screen. She's quiet for longer than a routine review takes. Mrs. Hargrove, she says carefully, can I ask, was anyone else with you when this transaction was authorized? I wasn't with anyone, I say. I was out of town. She turns slightly toward her screen, types something, reads. Then she turns the screen slightly in my direction. There is a note on the transaction, a teller note, the kind that gets added to the record when something slightly out of the ordinary happens during a transaction. It reads, Customer present, ID verified. I look at those 4 words. Customer present, ID verified. I was 4 hours away at my aunt's funeral when this transaction was authorized. I was crying in a hotel room when someone was sitting at this bank with my ID being verified as me. I was out of town, I say again, on the date of authorization. Marin's expression settles into something professional and very serious. She opens a new window on her screen. I can open a dispute, she says, but you'll need documentation of your whereabouts. I tell Marin everything. The funeral, the hotel, the 4-hour drive, the paper statement showing the initiation date, the calendar entry in Caleb's phone. The fact that I have never authorized this transfer and did not know about the recipient until I saw the 0 in my app at the grocery store. Marin types as I talk. She has the focused expression of someone who is not just taking notes, but building a file. When I finish, she's quiet for a moment. Then she prints a transaction log and slides it across the desk. This is everything associated with the authorization. The date, the time, the method, the teller notes. She looks at me. You should have documentation showing you were out of town on this date. Hotel receipt, fuel receipt, the funeral program, anything with a timestamp or a geographic marker. I have all of those, I say. Good. Bring them back. In person. She staples something to the transaction log before she hands it to me. And Mrs. Hargrove, I want you to be prepared for what the dispute process looks like. It involves a formal review, and the bank will need to examine everything. I understand, I say. She glances at the door, then back at me. The ID used wasn't yours, she says quietly. But it was a very convincing copy. I hold the transaction log with both hands. My name on an account I've held for 9 years. An authorization I didn't make. An ID that was mine in appearance and someone else's in reality. I walk to my car. I sit in the driver's seat for several minutes. Then I call Quinn. I don't tell Quinn everything on the phone. I don't need to. She hears something in my voice that tells her the summary can wait. I do one thing before she arrives. I search the recipient name from the transfer. The company name is plausible. The kind of name that sounds like it could be a legitimate investment firm if you heard it in a sentence, but that tells you nothing specific when you try to find it. I search for a website. I find one. Generic, sparse, the kind of site that gets built in an afternoon with template software. No real address, no team page, no documented history. I search for a business address. A street address comes up in a commercial listing. I look it up on a map service and click to the street view. A mailbox store. One of the chain ones that rents individual boxes and offers them as business addresses. The kind of address that looks real on a document and leads nowhere in person. I write the name, the address, and what I found in my notebook. Caleb comes home before Quinn arrives. He's cheerful in the way that sets my teeth on edge. The cheerfulness of someone who has convinced himself that resolve the problem if he just maintains the performance. I talked to Loretta, he says. The investment is in good hands. She trusts these people completely. Who is the company? I ask. It's Loretta's contact, family basically. We keep it in the family. It's a mailbox store address, I say. He goes very still, then he recovers. That's just their registered office. Lots of companies do that. He goes to the kitchen. I open my notebook. I write down the exact phrase he used. Family, basically. We keep it in the family. Quinn arrives at 7. She brings nothing because she came as soon as she could, and there wasn't time for preparations. She comes in, and she looks at me, and she looks at Caleb, and she reads the room, the way only people who've known you your whole life can read a room. We sit at the kitchen table, all three of us, and I watch Caleb perform normalcy for my sister, while my sister watches him, with her quiet, measuring eyes. The next morning I go back to the bank. Marin meets me with a file already prepared. She shows me the additional details she's been authorized to share. The external account linked to our savings account. The link was established months ago. I didn't know about a linked external account. Caleb told me we had 2 accounts, checking and savings. When was this linked, I ask. Marin checks. 4 months ago. 4 months ago. 4 months of a channel existing that I didn't know about, pointing from our savings toward an account I've never seen. Who is the external account owner? I ask. Marin looks at her screen. Then at me. It's not you, she says. I sit with that for a moment. The account is linked to our savings. The link was established 4 months ago. The owner is not me. Can you tell me anything else about it? I can tell you that it was set up with an authorization form, in person. She pauses. I can tell you the form is part of the documentation we'll be reviewing. I add everything to my notes when I get to my car. Then I call Quinn and tell her to look in the glove box when she gets a chance. That evening, the temperature in our house drops. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens the way temperature changes in a house when you've been ignoring a draft for a while and you finally stop ignoring it. Gradual and then obvious. Caleb sits across from me at dinner and he says I'm paranoid. That's the word he uses. Paranoid. You're building a case against your own husband, he says. Do you know how that sounds? I went to the bank, I say. I asked questions. You made accusations. He pushes his plate back slightly. You went in there and made us look like our marriage is falling apart. Something happened to our savings that I didn't know about and didn't agree to, I say, because you would have said no. He says it like this is a reasonable explanation, like my potential disagreement is the actual problem. That's the point, I say. My disagreement matters. He's quiet for a moment, then his voice drops into something flatter and more deliberate. If you embarrass me with the bank, he says, you'll regret it. I look at him across the table. This man I married 9 years ago. This man I built a life with and a savings account with and a home with. The threat in his voice is not loud. It's quiet in the particular way quiet threats are, the kind that require no volume to land. That night, Loretta is on the phone with relatives. I can hear her voice from the other room, soft and sad, talking about how difficult things have been lately, how worried she is about her son, how Heidi has become someone who creates conflict over nothing. By morning, my phone has 2 texts from cousins I rarely hear from asking if I'm okay. Quinn doesn't wait to be asked. I call her at 9 in the morning, before Caleb is up, and I try to keep my voice level. I give her the outline, the bank visit, the external account, the link transfer, the threat last night. She hears my voice anyway. The way sisters hear things that aren't in the words. She arrives by 11. She sits at my kitchen table, and she watches Caleb move through the kitchen, and she watches the way he speaks to me, and the way he doesn't speak to me, and the way his posture changes when he wants to establish something. After about 30 minutes, she goes to the hallway to get her jacket from the hook. She comes back with her jacket on. Heidi, she says quietly, while Caleb is in the other room, this isn't about money. This is about control. I know she's right. I've known it in the way you know things that are hard to say out loud, but hearing it from Quinn makes it real in a different way. She doesn't stay long. She says she needs to go, but she'll be back. On her way out, she asks Caleb if he left something on the front seat of his car. He says he doesn't think so, and goes to check. While he's walking to the car, Quinn leans back into the doorway. There's a folder in his glove box, she says. The latch is loose. Caleb comes back, says there's nothing on the seat. She must have been thinking of someone else. Quinn nods pleasantly and leaves. The next day, I offered to take Caleb's car to fill the gas tank. A small, ordinary errand. He hands me the keys without looking up from his phone. I drive to the gas station. I fill the tank. Then I pull into the parking area beside the air pump and I look at the glove box. Quinn said the latch was loose. She was right, it doesn't take digging. The folder is right there. Not hidden exactly, tucked but visible. The kind of tuck that means someone thought they'd have more time before it became a problem. I open it. Loan paperwork. Caleb's name on everything. A personal loan from a private lender rather than a bank. The terms are not favorable. The interest rate is the kind of number that suggests desperation rather than planning. I look at the date on the origination document. 8 months ago. 8 months before the savings account hit zero. 8 months ago is when the emergency fund started declining. Not dramatically at first, $50 here, $100 there. Small enough that each individual month didn't alarm me. I photograph every page of the folder with my phone. Then I put the folder back exactly as I found it and drive home. I tell Caleb the gas light is off and the car is fine. He says thanks without looking up. I go upstairs. I open my notebook and write down everything I found. The loan amount, the date, the lender name, the interest terms. Then I call Quinn. You were right about the folder, I say. I know, she says. What was in it? Quinn comes back that evening. The three of us are at the table again, which has become the location where the real conversations happen, whether anyone intended them to or not. Caleb has had a day to think, and he arrives at dinner slightly different. More careful. The particular carefulness of someone who knows more, is coming, and is managing it. We eat. Then Caleb sets down his fork and looks at me and the thing he's been building toward. The business he started 2 years ago was struggling. He borrowed money to keep it running. The loan terms got harder to meet and he fell behind. Loretta knew people, or said she knew people, who could help restructure it. They needed capital. The savings account seemed like the most available source. I did it for us, he says. The phrase that is supposed to end the conversation. The phrase that transforms a unilateral decision into a shared sacrifice. Quinn has been quiet through all of it. Now she asks one question. Then why did the bank log say Heidi was present for the authorization? Caleb looks at her. I don't know what the bank log says, he says. The teller note from the authorization, Quinn says. It logged a customer present for ID verification. Heidi was at a funeral, so who was customer present? He looks at the table. Then at me. I didn't, he starts. Who went to the bank? I ask. He's quiet for a long time. Loretta said she'd handle the paperwork, he says finally. She said she knew how to do it cleanly. The next morning, the story shifts. I'm in the kitchen when Loretta calls. I don't answer, but I hear the voicemail she leaves. Her voice has changed register from the casserole and comfort version to something harder underneath the warmth. She arrives an hour later with nothing in her hands, which is itself a statement. She sits at my table and she looks at me with an expression I haven't seen her wear before. Not concerned. Not maternal. Assessing. You've been forgetful lately, she says. Caleb mentioned it, leaving things in the wrong place. Misremembering conversations. I look at her. Moody, she continues. Reactive. Not yourself. Caleb comes in from the hallway. He's nodding, the nod of someone reciting something. I've been worried, he says. You haven't seemed okay. I'm fine, I say. We thought maybe some support would help, Loretta says. Her voice has gone back to warm. Sometimes when people are going through things, they need someone else to make decisions. Just temporarily. What kind of decisions, I ask. She looks at her hands, clasps them, looks up. Financial decisions can be stressful, she says. For someone who's struggling. I look at Caleb, he's looking at the floor. There's a term for that, I say. When someone else makes your financial decisions. Loretta tilts her head. It's just a tool. A power of attorney is a very normal thing. Lots of people use them. She says it like it's casual, like she's mentioning a recipe. Power of attorney. Like, it's nothing. That afternoon, I call the number my colleague at work mentioned 6 months ago when she was dealing with a property dispute and needed someone who didn't panic. Dorian Pike answers his own phone, which is the first thing that makes me trust him. He has a calm voice and precise questions, not clarifying questions, cutting questions, the kind that go directly to what matters. I drive to his office the next morning. I bring my notebook. I bring the bank transaction log from Marin. I bring the photographs of the loan paperwork from Caleb's glove box. I bring the hotel receipt and the funeral program from Aunt Patricia's service, both of which are still in my bag because I never got around to sorting that bag properly. Dorian reads through everything I've brought without speaking. He takes his own notes. When he finishes, he sets down his pen and looks at me. "Your goal is protection," he says. "Not revenge. Revenge comes free when the truth is documented. Your job is documentation. My job is to make sure the documentation is usable." "What do I need to do?" I ask. "Right now, nothing confident that gives them a scene to describe later." He picks up his pen again. "Your goal is to be the least reactive person in this situation while being the most prepared." Then he asks a question that I've been waiting for without knowing I was waiting for it. "Every date," he says. "I need every date. The transfer initiation, the authorization, the day you were out of town, the day the external account was created, every date you can document." I open my notebook to the first page. Dorian contacts the bank through formal legal channels. He requests the authorization records, the full teller documentation, the branch footage request procedures, the complete account history for the period in question. Marin cooperates with what she's legally able to provide and flags the account for in-person only changes going forward. She is professional and careful, and I understand that she has seen versions of this before. The documentation Dorian receives is several pages. He reads through it with me present in his office on a Thursday afternoon. Most of it confirms what I already know. The timeline of account changes, the external link, the authorization date. Then Dorian pauses. He's looking at the teller notes section. Each teller is trained to add brief observational notes to transactions that present any unusual element. A detail about demeanor, appearance, something that stood out. The note from the authorization transaction is brief, standard professional language about ID verification, customer present and cooperative, and then one more detail, specific enough to be a clothing observation. Customer wore a red scarf. Dorian reads it once more. Then he looks up at me. "Do you wear red scarves?" he says. "I hate scarves. I have always hated them. They make me feel closed in. I can count on both hands the number of times I've worn a scarf of any kind in my adult life, and every one of them was under sufficient cold that I had no choice. I have never in my adult life chosen to wear a red scarf." Dorian goes very still. Not dramatically. Just the particular stillness of someone who has been watching a picture develop and has just seen the last piece appear. "That's not a mistake in the record," he says. "That's a description. A specific, observable detail recorded by a teller who saw a person and noted what they were wearing." He sets the page down. "That's an impersonation detail." He says it the way you say something when you want it to be clear that you're being precise. "Someone went to my bank. Someone used a copy of my ID. Someone sat across from a teller and authorized a transfer from my account." And that someone was wearing a red scarf. I think about Loretta. I think about her sitting at my kitchen table patting my hand. I think about her casseroles and her warmth and her decade of presence in my marriage. I look at Dorian. "Loretta wears red scarves," I say. "You're certain?" "She almost always wears them. It's her thing. Church photos, family photos, every formal occasion." Dorian writes something down. "Quinn calls me that evening. I tell her about the scarf detail. She's quiet. Then, Heidi. She has photos on her church group page. She's wearing a red scarf in almost every one from the past 2 years." Dorian runs a public records search. What he finds is not dramatic. It's quiet and documentable, and worse, because of it. Loretta recently co-signed something with Caleb. A financial instrument. The details are in the public record because these things, when they reach a certain size, become accessible. She's not a passive observer. She's a signatory. She has a formal, documented financial stake in the arrangement that our savings were apparently fed into. Dorian explains what this means. When someone co-signs, they have exposure. When they have exposure, they have motivation. When they have motivation and access to someone who can be pressured or impersonated, the picture of what happened becomes clearer. They're creating a paper story, Dorian says. Every time you seem reactive or emotional or confused in front of them, that gets filed away. They're building a record where you look unreliable and where their decisions appear to be protective responses to your instability. I know, I say. Don't give them material, he says. Be boring, be calm, document everything. I drive home. Caleb is at the table when I walk in. He has papers in front of him. He slides them toward me. Not aggressively, conversationally, as if this is just the next thing on an agenda. I need you to sign this, he says. It simplifies things, restructures the loan terms so we're not paying double interest. He says it like it's routine, like this is the kind of thing couples sign together on an ordinary evening. Loretta is on the sofa behind him, looking at her phone. Be a wife, she says without looking up. I pick up the document. I read the cover page, then the second page, then the third. It's a spousal consent form, attached to a loan refinancing and restructuring arrangement. My signature would formalize my consent to a financial obligation I had no part in creating and no knowledge of until this week. My signature on this form would, among other things, create a shared legal liability for the debt Caleb took on 8 months ago and has been servicing badly ever since. My signature on this form would make me responsible for paying for a decision that was made without me. Caleb is watching me read. If you love me, he says, sign it. It helps both of us. I set the papers down flat on the table. I pick up my purse from the chair where I set it when I came in. I don't yell. I don't cry. I don't give Loretta anything to note or describe later. I stand up. I'm going to Quinn's, I say. I'll be back tomorrow. Caleb's voice comes as I'm walking to the door. Heidi, if you walk out right now, you're choosing war. I open the door. I close it behind me. In my car, my hands are steady on the wheel. I drive 3 blocks, pull over and text Dorian. I didn't sign. He tried tonight. I'm at Quinn's. Dorian responds within 5 minutes. Good. I'll call you in the morning. 3 minutes after that, Caleb texts me. You just chose war. The papers come 8 days later. I'm at Quinn's when they arrive. A process server, which means Caleb has been working on this long enough to have hired someone. I open the envelope at Quinn's kitchen table. Caleb has filed for separation. The filing claims the marriage has broken down due to financial irresponsibility on my part. It characterizes the dispute over the savings transfer as evidence of my instability. It frames the transfer itself as a mutual financial decision. Mutual. The word for a decision one person made without telling the other. The filing contains a specific claim that I agreed in person to the transfer of funds on the date of authorization. The date of authorization. The date I was 4 hours away at my aunt's funeral. They've locked their story to a date. A specific, documentable date. I call Dorian. He answers on the second ring and I read him the relevant section. He is quiet for a moment. Read me the exact date they specified, he says. I read it. Another silence. Longer. Then Dorian says, Heidi, I need you to listen carefully. They specified the date in a court filing. That date is now their official legal position. And I was out of town on that date, I say. With documentation, he says. Hotel receipt, GPS timestamp, Quinn's photos from the reception. Funeral program. Yes. Then they just lock themselves into a lie, he says, in writing. Under oath. A pause. I'm going to schedule an emergency hearing, he says. Dorian calls it the gift. When someone commits a deception orally, it's a conversation. When they commit it in a document, it's evidence. When they commit it in a court filing, it's a sworn statement. And a sworn statement that can be proven false is the end of a story. We spend the following week building the counter-documentation. The hotel receipt from the night of Aunt Patricia's funeral. Time-stamped, with my name and payment method. The hotel is in a city 4 hours from our bank. The GPS data from my phone for that date, pulled through my carrier at Dorian's request. My phone was 4 hours away all day. Then driving back. The funeral program. Dated. Printed with the funeral home's information, with my name and the list of family members who attended. Quinn's photos from the reception. Her phone's metadata shows the location, the date, the time. I'm in several of them. A text message chain between Quinn and me from that day. sent and received from my number, from a location 4 hours away, during the hours the bank records show the authorization occurring. The teller note with the scarf detail. The external account documentation showing an account owner who is not me. The loan paperwork from Caleb's glove box, photographed and dated. Dorian lays it all on his conference table and looks at it for a long moment. Their filing says she agreed in person, he says. Every piece of this says she was somewhere else. He picks up the hotel receipt. This is a clean case, clean documentation, documented timeline, and they handed us the specific claim we needed them to make. He looks up. The hearing is in 4 days. The courtroom is not large. Loretta arrives first. She sits in the gallery wearing a blazer and composed distress, the expression of a mother watching her family be torn apart by an unreasonable daughter-in-law. Caleb arrives looking like a man who has been told by his attorney to appear grieved rather than defensive. He achieves it imperfectly. Their attorney presents the case with practiced evenness. Heidi is financially irresponsible, erratic, unwilling to cooperate with reasonable family financial planning. The transfer was a mutual decision made with her knowledge and consent. The separation was necessary to protect Caleb from continued disruption. Then Dorian stands. He doesn't perform. He doesn't build to anything dramatically. He places documents on the lectern and works through them in order. The transfer initiation date. The bank's authorization log showing the date and time of the in-person authorization. My hotel receipt from the same date showing me 4 hours away. The funeral program. The GPS timestamp. Quinn's photos. The teller note with the red scarf. Loretta's church group photos printed, showing her consistently wearing red scarves in formal settings over the past 2 years. The external account with an owner who is not me. Caleb and Loretta's co-signed financial document from the public record. He presents each piece without editorializing. Just documents. Just dates. Just what happened. Then the judge looks up from the papers. She asks for the bank manager to come in the following morning to testify about customer presence during the authorization. Caleb's attorney makes a sound that isn't quite an objection. Marin testifies with the precision of someone who has been a branch manager for 16 years and understands exactly what her words mean in a legal setting. She confirms the authorization date and time. She confirms the teller notes. She confirms the scarf detail, explaining that tellers are trained to note observable specifics when an authorization involves any unusual element and that the note was added in real time. She confirms the external account and the ownership name. She confirms that the in-person authorization form is part of the bank's documentation and is available for forensic review upon court order. When Caleb's attorney asks her if it's possible the teller made an error about the scarf, Marin pauses. The teller's notes from that day are consistent with every other element of the record, she says. Notes that specific about appearance are added because something prompted attention. A detail like a red scarf would be noted because it was visible and specific. The judge writes for almost a full minute after Marin finishes. Then she looks at Caleb. Misrepresentation in financial disclosures submitted to this court is a serious matter, she says. The timeline discrepancy between the filed claim and the documented evidence is significant and will be factored into today's proceedings. Caleb's face changes. The composed grief falls away in pieces. Loretta stands in the gallery. Your Honor, I just want to explain. The judge looks at her. You are not a party to this proceeding, she says. Please sit down. Loretta sits down. The court grants the protective measures that afternoon. A temporary financial restraining order preventing any further transfer, modification, or encumbrance of marital assets without court approval. Required full financial disclosure from Caleb of all accounts, all loans, all obligations, all assets, going back 18 months. A formal tracing order for the transferred funds. Caleb is required to account for every dollar, not his version, not Loretta's version. The documented, verifiable version that will now be reviewed by people whose job is to find discrepancies. Loretta's role in the authorization, the external account, and the co-signed loan becomes part of the formal evidence record. Her help, which was supposed to be invisible and untraceable, is now documented in a court file with her name on it. It is not power. It is evidence. Dorian files a formal request to trace the transferred funds to the mailbox store company and its actual beneficiaries. That investigation will take time. But the order is in place, and the records are preserved. That evening I sit at Quinn's kitchen table with a cup of tea and a copy of the court's protective order, and I feel something I haven't felt in weeks. Still. Not happy, exactly. Not triumphant. But still. The way water goes still when the thing that was disturbing it has been removed. Quinn sits across from me. She doesn't say anything for a while. Then she says, "What happens next?" Dorian says the tracing will take a few weeks, and Caleb has 30 days to produce the disclosure documents. And after that, I look at the court order. Then I look at my notebook, sitting on the table with 6 weeks of dates and entries and observations. I move the rest of my personal funds to a protected account, I say. Dorian has a plan for that, something Caleb can't reach and Loretta can't access, and no one can authorize except me in person with my actual ID and my actual face. Quinn nods. And then, I close the notebook. I think about Caleb's text. He just chose war. I think about the grocery store, the zero in my app. Relax. Trust me. Trust me. The 2 words that were supposed to end the conversation. The 2 words that assumed my trust was something he could claim rather than something he'd earned. The 2 words that stood in for all the paperwork he was hiding and all the decisions he was making alone, and all the months he watched me carefully save money that he was already planning to move. And then I build something that belongs to me, I say. Not a shared account, not a joint plan. Something with my name only, built on what's left after the tracing is done. Quinn wraps her hands around her own cup. That's a good plan, she says. I look out her kitchen window at the early dark. Trust isn't a demand. You can't text someone "trust me" and have it land as truth. You can't put the person's name on a bank authorization while they're at a funeral and call it consent. You can't build a plan around someone's savings and their absence and their name and call it love. Trust is something you build, one honest action at a time, one documented, verifiable, accountable action at a time. Caleb told me to trust him while he was hiding the paperwork. The transfer date told the truth instead. And the truth, once it's in the record, doesn't need anyone's permission to stay there. Subscribe, because if someone ever hands you their version of events and asks you to sign it without reading it, you need to know that the dates always tell the real story, and the real story always wins.